From the broadcast center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, I'm Max Mashman, and these are your 12 o'clock headlines. Our top story for the hour, a weather warning persists across the province with winds expected to reach over 100 kilometers an hour in coastal regions of the province. Winds are expected to be especially violent around the coast of Vancouver Island, including Victoria, where these winds are expected to begin at around 70 kilometers an hour midday. Strong winds are also expected to reach portions of the Sunshine Coast and Haida Gwaii. Though winds will be less of a concern in the lower mainland cities within Metro Vancouver are likely to experience strong winds and rains throughout the day. Rainfall warnings are also in place for Howe Sound. Power outages are being experienced across the province, with several in Metro Vancouver and the coast of Vancouver Island, as well as up the Sunshine Coast, according to BC Hydro. And 4 BC ferry sailings have been cancelled between Tsawwassen and Schwartz Bay. BC Premier David Eby is heading towards Ottawa today to present the province in discussions with federal officials, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The itinerary includes several big issues for BC residents, such as housing, infrastructure, energy, and natural disaster preparedness. The Provincial Housing, Jobs and Transportation Minister, as well as Niki Sarma, the Attorney General of the province. Other provincial officials are also expected to attend. Port Coquitlam residents were stunned to see an openly racist poster on their streets. Our own Joseph Augusti has more.
Reports of a racist whites-only mom-and-pop group enraged many across the Lower Mainland when posters advertising the group were seen in Port Coquitlam and Coquitlam. The group, which advocates for people of European descent to escape from forced diversity, promoted time spent among those who look like them. The group was widely panned by the public, with Poco Mayor Brad West decrying it as vile garbage. By the time Poco bylaw officers came to the location where the posters were, the signs had been taken down. Joseph Augusti, 1680, The Crow.
Vancouver Street will be shut down to traffic near Waterfront Station due to a protest. Our reporter Richard Davis has more.
Sikh groups are planning to protest outside of the Consulate General of India's office today at noon, following the death of Hardeep Singh Najjar and the Indian government's suspension of visa services for Canadian citizens. Last Monday, Prime Minister Trudeau stood up in the House of Commons and accused the Indian government of being behind the killing of Najjar, a Canadian citizen and prominent Sikh activist. The Indian government wanted Najjar for years, claiming he had links to terror groups. Due to the protests, the VPD have closed off Howe Street between West Cordova and West Hastings Street. Richard Davis, 1680, The Crow.
To discuss the protests, we brought in the reporter behind the story, Richard Davis. So, Richard, how does the situation look like on the ground?
Hey, Max. So it's gotten a little busier since we last talked, but there's several VPD cruisers out front, and it looks like there's actually a barricade right now manned by VPD officers protecting the Indian consulate.
And Richard, how long have these protests been going on?
So they've been going on for a little bit now, but according to what I've been told, this is the first protest here outside the consulate since the accusations were leveled by Prime Minister Trudeau that India was possibly behind the killing of Najjar.
All right. Thank you so much, Richard. Stay safe out there.
Thank you. We'll do it.
All right, and in a related story, BC's Premier David Eby is calling for more information from the federal government after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau revealed Canadian intelligence services were investigating a potential link between the murder and the Indian government. Eby says people in the province have been feeling pressure from India, and the provincial government needs more information to ensure the safety of residents. In other provincial news, police say an individual was shot this weekend in Richmond. Richmond RCMP officers responded to a call in the area of Cooney and Anderson Road in the early hours of Sunday morning. Upon arriving at the scene, police say they found an unidentified victim who died from their injuries. IHIT, or BC's homicide investigation team, are working with the Richmond RCMP on the case. Opposition parties are hammering House Speaker Anthony Rota for inviting a man who fought for the Nazis' infamous SS division to an address by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The man in question, Yaroslav Hunka, a constituent of Rota and someone who referred to as a Canadian and Ukrainian hero, to standing ovation. The NDP has since called for Rota to resign, something Rota has made clear he does not want to do. Conservative MP Michelle Pempel-Garder has made it clear she thinks the situation is beyond embarrassing.
It is a stain on our country. And I refuse, as a member of this place who represents 120,000 Canadians, to collectively share responsibility with a government that has a pattern of not vetting questionable individuals that they take meetings with.
In other Canadian news, the Ontario legislature has resumed sitting after a summer recess packed with controversy about the removal of a greenbelt which surrounds Toronto, a decision which Ontario Premier reversed after facing criticism and accusations the development was favoring certain developers over others. Ontario Municipal and Housing Affairs Minister Paul Caldara says there will be more changes to the Greenbelt soon.
Mr. Speaker, I will be bringing forward legislation very soon which will not only return the lands but ensure that an additional 7,000 acres of land are put into the Greenbelt. And we will go one step further, Mr. Speaker. We will codify in legislation the boundaries of the Greenbelt, Mr. Speaker, so that it is protected through legislation and not through regulation.
And now for some news from our neighbors to the south. Residents are being allowed to return to a town on the island of Maui, which was desecrated by a wildfire. This will be their first time home in 7 weeks. The Associated Press's Jennifer King has more.
Residents of Lahaina who survived the wildfire on August 8th are eager to see their devastated properties and collect anything that might remain. Authorities divided the burned area into 17 zones and have started handing out passes for today and tomorrow.
We still are at 97 fatalities. 89 people have been identified, and we have 15 outstanding investigations.
Hawaii Governor Josh Green.
We'll make sure that people have a chance to go to their properties starting on Monday to get closure.
Maui Emergency Management official Daryl Oliveira says it's sure to be an emotional moment.
For many of them, they have lost everything, including loved ones. We want to make this process as comfortable and as easy on them and keep them safe.
Jess Clayton says she just wants the freedom to be there and absorb what happened and bring back whatever she might find. Officials are urging people not to sift through the ashes for fear of raising toxic dust. I'm Jennifer King.
New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez is rejecting some of the accusations against him in a federal indictment. Sagar Meghani was with the Associated Press has more.
Prosecutors say FBI agents found nearly $500,000 in cash in Menendez's home.
Now, this may seem old-fashioned.
The senator says he kept the cash on hand for emergencies and because his family used to fear its assets being seized in its native Cuba.
These were monies drawn from my personal savings account based on the income that I have lawfully derived.
In announcing the indictment Friday, prosecutor Damian Williams noted the cash had some tie to Fred Davies, one of the three businessmen from whom Menendez is accused of taking bribes.
Some of the envelopes of cash contain Davies' fingerprints or Davies' DNA.
Sagar Meghani at the White House.
The percentage of Americans who think extreme weather events are tied to climate change has gone up. AP Jennifer's King has more.
Drought, extreme heat, severe storms, wildfires, and flooding. About 87% of Americans say they've experienced at least one extreme weather event in the past 5 years, up from 79% back in April. That's according to a new poll from the Associated Press, Nork Center for Public Affairs Research. This summer's heat waves may be behind it. 74% of Americans say they've been hit by extreme heat in the past 5 years, up 20 20% from the spring, with 92% of those respondents noting this summer's high temperatures. More Americans, 64%, also say they believe climate change was at least in part behind the extreme weather they experienced. That's up from 54% in April. This summer was the hottest ever measured in the Northern Hemisphere, according to the World Meteorological Organization. Jennifer King, Washington.
In international news, an Italian mafia boss has died in prison in Italy. ABC's Inez De La Cuta has more.
Italian mafia boss Messina Denaro was arrested in January and had been serving time in an Italian maximum security prison. He was recently transferred to a hospital as he suffered from cancer, his condition worsening in the last few weeks. Italian media has called him the last godfather. He was convicted for planning the 1992 murders of anti-mafia prosecutors Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino. He was also held responsible for bombings in Rome, Florence, and Milan in 1993 that killed 10 people. Denaro was 61. Inez De La Cuta, ABC News, at the Foreign Desk.
The head of the United Nations inquiry into Ukraine say they are investigating reports that Russia is committing a genocide within the country. Chairman of the inquiry, Eric Mose, had this to say.
But what is essential at this stage, where we are at the investigating stage, is simply to inform the public, knowing that there is concern about whether there is a genocide in Ukraine, to inform the public that we are looking into this matter. That is the only point at this stage.
Moving over to the world of entertainment, where studios and the Writers Guild of America have reached a tentative agreement. The WGA has called the agreement exceptional, and a vote on the contract is expected as early as tomorrow. Strike Captain Bill Wokoff has high hopes.
I know they would not have told us a tentative deal was reached and told us that picketing is suspended if it wasn't exemplary.
And in more entertainment news, British police are investigating sexual assault allegations against comedian, actor, and political commentator Russell Brand. The AP's Margie Saruleta has more.
London's Metropolitan Police confirm it is looking into non-recent sexual offences after Britain's Channel 4 and The Times and Sunday Times newspapers ran reports on Russell Brand. Police do not mention Brand by name, but refer to the reports. No arrests have been made. The reports quote 4 women as saying Brand assaulted them, and one says Brand raped her. Brand has denied doing anything wrong and says his relationships were consensual. I'm Archie Zaraletta.
And now for the weather. It is currently 15 degrees and raining in Vancouver with weather advisories for the weekend. This is Max Mashman, and you are listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikki-King.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikki-King. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
There's a lot of people who are struggling to pay rent. I get calls all the time. You know, I'm a mom and I have a child. I've been working. I lost my job, and the landlord's going to kick me out next month. Well, what the heck? She's going to be homeless with a kid.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Crow Chronicles. I'm Alicia Nolasco.
And I'm Kevin Pontius. What you just heard was an excerpt of an interview with Jim Mandolin, who works for the Homeless Services Association of BC. Jim is also a former addict and gave us some great insight on our topic today.
So today we're talking about homelessness in Vancouver, which has been a controversial topic for a while. So according to a study from SFU, the homeless crisis in Vancouver started in the 1980s, and it has gotten worse progressively.
Alicia, why do you think the homeless problem has gotten progressively worse over the years?
Well, prior to the 1980s, the federal government invested generously in the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. This helped adequate affordable housing, and there was a moment where it stopped. So by the 1990s, the province was now taking care of housing. And I believe it's one of the main reasons it started to get so bad.
Over the years, we've had this stereotype when it comes to the homeless that you shouldn't be giving homeless people money because they're going to spend it on drugs or alcohol and they don't know how to manage money. Even growing up, I just feel like I was always told to never give a homeless person money, give them food or water because they're going to spend the money and just get drugs or alcohol. There was recently a study published by the Foundations for Social Change with UBC that actually proves the opposite of the stereotype.
The study gave 50 people who had been homeless for under 2 years $7,500 and tracked them to see what they did with it. They also tracked other 65 people who did not receive a cash transfer. The study also proved that the stereotypes are not connected to the reality, given that many of the people use the money on rent, food, and clothing.
We recently had the opportunity to speak with one of Vancouver's most renowned homeless advocates, Judy Graves. Given her decades of experience in the scene, we asked her what she thought about giving cash transfers to the unhoused.
I don't think that cash transfer is going to work for someone who has a severe addiction. The addiction will always take precedence, but most people who become homeless do not have severe addictions. So this would be a wonderful prevention program. So someone who's never been in the downtown east side before in their life will wind up there because it's the only affordable scrap of housing for them, and just to have a roof over their heads.
The biggest issue with Vancouver is that most of the time when people see a person in a homeless situation, they automatically assume that they don't have a job or are lazy. Most of the time, these people have severe mental health issues or addictions. I don't think anyone wakes up and decides to go through these circumstances.
Absolutely. Something that both Jim and Judy talk about is the main difference between being homeless and having an addiction. In many cases, they're both combined. Someone who's already struggling to pay bills and one day gets fired can end up in the streets. I believe that we need to do a better job at supporting our community, no matter what issues you might have.
I 100% agree. That is why this cash transfer project works great for people who need the money right away and don't have any addiction.
Yeah, our homeless population is mostly contained in Vancouver downtown east side. And according to stats from the city, the government approximately spends $55,000 in each person per year. If we follow a project like the Foundation for Social Change did, this might be the solution that will benefit both the government and the vulnerable to save money.
I totally agree. Because with this, the government could invest in giving immediate help to people with addictions instead of mindlessly funding shelters.
Our guest speakers talk a little bit more in depth about this situation.
I know there's some, big treatment centers, but sometimes there's like, you're an addict and you decide, okay, I got to change my life. I want to go get some help. So they go to an addiction recovery place and they say, okay, you can come for help, but 1 month or 2 months or 4 months waiting list. So go back out and try to survive try to stop the drugs and alcohol or whatever the addiction is on your own, and then come back in 3 to 4 months. Well, that's not going to work. Someone's ready to go into recovery now. There is very little help for that.
The thing that we've been asking for is detox on demand. That as soon as somebody decides that they want to leave the drugs behind, they need to be able to get in at that moment. It's a passing moment. They need to be able to get into detox immediately and be moved through to treatment immediately, housed away from the drug scene. If we were able to do that, we would save so many lives. We would save so many families. And it's not rocket science.
I don't know for you, but for me, it's incredible to me that both Judy and Jim have been working in all sorts of scenarios as advocates and share the same opinion when it comes to addicts not getting immediate help. What is your take on this, Kevin?
I think looking back at the study, it proved that the people they supported with the cash transfers ended up saving the government more money because it helped them get housing and other resources faster. This compared to the other people they tracked who did not receive any money and just had the support systems that are already there in place, to me proves that what Judy and Jim are saying is dead on.
100%, Kevin. The current system might not be working for everyone, and the answer to this is because many people don't feel safe going to shelters, especially when you're having a hard time dealing already with mental health issues and addiction. And our guest, Jim, was very open and candid about his experience in a shelter.
There's many people. Some people don't want to even go in shelters. They won't go in shelters. I wouldn't go in shelters when I was a kid. I went into a Catholic Charities shelter when I was in 1970, and because I was molested in my life from all kinds of weird people before 15, then I didn't, like I'd laid down on the mat, and then there's all these men in there, and they're moving around in the dark, and I'm going like, they're going to come and touch me. So I couldn't stay. And I never stayed.
There's no easy way to follow such a horrific and candid story. We just want to take a second to really thank Jim for being so vulnerable and open with us.
And that is why we need to be empathetic about why some people just straight up decide to live in the streets. It's very easy to judge anything, really, but we never know what someone's going through. Judy Graves also talked to us about how people living under these circumstances get an urge to get better, but given the lack and shortage of resources, the desires can't be met.
I do know from working with so many people who were addicted that every person who is addicted sometime during this year is going to wake up and say, I can't do this anymore. I've got to get out of this, and start trying to get into a detox. And they're going to be met with, well, we don't have a bed. We don't have space. No, you can't even sleep on the carpet.
I think the main thing we have learned from researching this podcast and interviewing our amazing guests is that we need to try new things. There's no direct solution to the problem, and it's an extremely complex issue. But if we keep doing the same things, we're not going to improve anyone's lives.
For sure. I think we could have more universities doing studies. Hopefully with some government funding, we could really start to understand what works and what doesn't. Because we already know what doesn't work, but we aren't doing enough to change it.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of The Crow Chronicles. I'm Kevin Pontius.
And I am Alicia Nolasco. See you next time.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika King.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika King. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon. I am Elisa Nolasco for 1680 The Crow, bringing you the noon headlines. The Vancouver Fraser Port Authority says container shipments are falling as consumer demand weakens amid a sputtering economy. According to the authorities, the container shipment volume at the Port of Vancouver in the first half of the year fell 14% compared with the same 6-month period in 2022. Interim CEO Victor Pang says the figures reflected a softer economy, which contracted slightly in the second quarter. Movement of construction materials and auto parts also slumped, while shipments of finished vehicles ramped up as supply chain kinks smoothed out. Some opposition leaders are calling on House of Commons Speaker Anthony Rota to resign after he invited a man who fought for the Nazis to attend a speech by the Ukrainian president. But the Conservative says Rota isn't the only one to blame. During questioning period today, Tory leader Pierre Poilievre argued that it is the Prime Minister's responsibility to protect a visiting foreign leader from this kind of embarrassment.
It was the job of the Prime Minister to protect that foreign leader from this massive embarrassment. If the Prime Minister failed to have vetting in place, then that in itself is a massive act of incompetence. Will he take responsibility and apologize for that?
Rota rose in the House of Commons today and apologized to parliamentarians for inviting Yaroslav Honka to last Friday's address. Port Coquitlam residents were stunned to see an openly racist poster on their streets. Joseph Agosti has more.
Reports of a racist whites-only mom-and-pop group enraged many across the Lower Mainland when posters advertising the group were seen in Port Coquitlam and Coquitlam. The group, which advocates for people of European descent to escape from forced diversity, promoted time spent among those who look like them. The group was widely panned by the public, with Poco Mayor Brad West decrying it as vile garbage. By the time Poco bylaw officers came to the location where the posters were, the signs had been taken down. Joseph Augusti, 1680, The Crow.
Heavy rains have set off a landslide in Guatemala's capital, sweeping several humble homes into a river and leaving a young girl dead. At least 15 people are missing, including 10 minors. The body of the 5-year-old girl was recovered by firefighters, partially buried in debris and mud, miles down the Naranjo River. The overnight landslide was swept away 6 homes and the families who lived in them. Firefighters are searching for the missing. Landslides are a constant threat during Guatemala's rainy season, which extends to November. There are few controls on where people build their homes, especially in poor settlements, putting them at a greater risk. Newfoundland and Labrador's Premier says Quebec will have to pay more if it wants to keep buying electricity from Labrador Dam after 2041. Andrew Flores says he's waiting for an offer from Quebec's Premier François Legault, who wants to extend and expand an existing power deal.
I'm certainly open to hearing what Mr. Legault and his team have to say. It will have to be a good deal for Newfoundland and Labrador, for us to entertain any further developments.
Quebec's hydro utility has made more than $28 billion from the Churchill Fall deal, which has only returned $2 billion to Newfoundland and Labrador. The Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General just announced preliminary data released by the BC Coroner Services, confirming more than 1,600 British Columbians were lost to toxic, unregulated drugs in the first 8 months of 2023. The 174 deaths reported to the BC Coroner Services in August represent the lowest total recorded in a single month since June 2022, and equals to about 5.6 lives lost per day. Caution should be exercised when drawing conclusions regarding trends from a single month of data, particularly given that recent data is preliminary and subject to change as investigations are completed and causes of death are confirmed. British police are looking into sexual assault allegations against comedian Russell Brand.
London's Metropolitan Police confirm it is looking into non-recent sexual offences after Britain's Channel 4 and the Times and Sunday Times newspapers ran reports on Russell Brand. Police do not mention Brand by name, but refer to the reports. No arrests have been made. The reports quote 4 women as saying Brand assaulted them, and one says Brand raped her. Brand has denied doing anything wrong and says his relationships were consensual. I'm Archie Zaraletta.
Moving on to weather, temperature is currently 15.4 degrees with a humidity of 88%. Condition is light rain with wind going east at 23 kilometers per hour. Thank you for listening. I am Alicia Nolasco for 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.